Everybody see that? It's pretty close to the outside diameter of this area here. Okay, so if that was this small in there, that means, and it was this wide here, that means that area is about that thick. And you're gonna have to do a lot of trimming. The interior of the pot dictates the trimming on the outside. You trim to the inside of your vessel. So if you want something squiggly and cutesy, you need to have that appearance in here first, and then you trim to that form. So it's a hard concept for a lot of people because they're looking out here and they have an idea of where this should be in their mind, but it's not reflected in here. So whatever you want to do, you want to reflect it inside first, and then it all comes together. So what you're going to do, you're going to set that on the wheel somehow, eyeball it so it's somewhere in the center of this disc. And there's a lot of different ways of centering this. And those of you that looked online this week because you knew we were going to trim this week, have some ideas. If you're doing 30, 40 mugs, you're not going to sit here like this. You're going to just very gently tap it in the center. Okay, and if you want to learn that technique, bring in a can of beans and practice with that, because you'll lose a lot of pots trying to learn that technique. So for now, you're going to center from the area that you cut the wedge from. Everybody know what I'm talking about? Remember when it was like this? You cut that wedge of clay out so you could pick it up and remove it? Okay, so you're gonna, hopefully this is the roundest part of your pot, and it's probably the thickest part, and that's where you're gonna do most of the trimming. We don't care what this does down here. This could be real wacko, but this is the area we're concerned with. And so go back to that technique I showed you earlier. Anchor your hand here so you don't fudge it, and put this hand on top of it, or hold it so that you're not moving with the pot. Okay, it touches your fingers, slow the wheel real slow. And at the furthest distance from your finger, you're gonna stop the wheel. And if it's going that slow, it's easy to do. And move it toward you about half that distance. Now we're going to repeat that until we get it so it's touching your finger 98, 99% of the time. Okay? If you're too far off, you could go through the side of your pot. And also, if you have a thin area and a thick area in a pot, sometimes it'll warp the pot. These here we don't have to worry about so much, but if you're doing bowls and larger pieces, it can make a big difference because the thin area is going to do what?
Get thinner and break through.
It's, well, that too,
Fire
but also
faster.
it's going to heat fastest in the kiln.
Oh, in the kiln.
Yeah, and that can cause warpage.
So you keep centering it a little bit
So
more.
you keep doing this until you got it touching your finger almost all the time. There's not a big, there's a little flat spot here, so I'm not going to worry about that. That was something Elizabeth did to challenge me.
Who's this?
Elizabeth's pot. Also, that's from squeezing your pot when you lift it. So remember, you're not going to squeeze the pot when you're lifting it off the wheel. Okay? And so then what you're going to do is you're going to stick it down. Now some of you have pots that rock, that move around when you turn them over because they weren't level when you chamois them. Some of you are pushing down on the chamois, so they're a little off. So what you want to do is you tear your clay off, hold this steady, and if you see a gap, that wedge goes into the gap. When you're tacking your pots down, you don't push directly against the rim. If you do that, you can fracture the rim. You may not even notice it, but when you get it back from the bisque fire, it could have a split. Maybe it doesn't show up then, but it shows up in the glaze firing. So you want to be very gentle. So tear your clay off, push it down, but not directly against that rim. Normally 4 pieces of clay are enough, but if you're really in love with that clay, then put 5 or 6 pieces down. You know, if that pot is really emotionally part of your being, then go back and put some more clay over those pieces of clay and push it down. Okay, and if you're going to do some chattering too, you want to really anchor this pot down, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to put a little divot right here, and that's where you're going to put a finger in that area so that you can put your finger in there, and then if the pot comes loose, you'll feel it before it takes off and hits somebody over here. Because it's going to go out in that direction. Okay?
That's all
And
we
then,
do,
pardon?
just that tiny little.
Yeah, you know, finger size, you know, just to get your finger. And then you, those of you that want to can anchor yourselves, put a thumb in here. Now this thumb is a spring to keep you from pushing too hard into the pot. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the high points off first, okay? So just, because Elizabeth squeezed this pot so hard because she
Sure
loved
did.
it.
No, I didn't do it right, and then I learned
So-
to lift it off properly.
Okay, and the tool is that you're using, you notice how things are just coming off nice? You're only gonna use the upper corner of the tool. And very shallow cuts. You're not gonna make big tracks here. And you're holding the tool tight enough so it's taking all this nice, pretty even slivers of clay out.
So you're
And
not really flat against that whole
never
edge.
against, no, you're just
Okay.
taking off the highest points just to get it in the round pretty much. And then we want this foot high enough so that when you're glazing, you don't get glaze on the kiln shelves. So you want this about 1/4 of an inch high. And normally the foot falls, like it shows here, the foot's gonna fall under that curve for mugs and vertical shapes that we're dealing with, okay? So keep that handy for the different shapes as we go into it. The dotted line is the area that goes away, right? You're gonna go to. So I'm holding this tool. The key is nice, even pieces of clay coming out. The only time you'd use the flat is if you want to get rid of those lines maybe very lightly, okay? So I'm getting up here closer. I'm gonna turn my tool around. Now you can do it any way you want. I like to put in a negative curve right in here to kind of complement this wonderful positive curve that Elizabeth put in here. And also, when I looked in there, I checked visually to see where this was, and also I checked to see how thick it is. Now, if you did your cut at the level of the floor, this should signify how thick the floor is. Does that make sense? Remember, we cut this off, you do the cut at the level of the floor. So if you leave a little extra clay in there when you're cutting, that's fine. It makes it easier to pick off the wheel because we don't use bats in here. And you need a place too for the tongs to fit. So those of you that want to get used to using tongs for dipping pots, you want to undercut. Now the tips of the tongs are about the same size as a ballpoint pen. Shrinkage is about 10 to 12% on this clay. So make it a little bigger than you really think you need. And so they're going to grab in here so you can dip your pots, okay? So take your finger and smooth it out so it's not sharp. Remember, we have kids loading the kiln and unloading the kiln, and they don't set things as gently as we do. So you don't want these sharp edges there because if they are, when they set them in there, they'll chip them, okay? So when you get the outside where you like it, you're happy with it, you like the curve, the outside of the foot is in the proper place to fit the form, then you're going to go over here with your fingers on the outside, and normally the width of the foot should represent the thickness of the rim. Not all the time, but generally that's what we're looking for. When people come into the shop, what do they do for cups and small pieces? They pick them up, and what do?
Turn it over.
They turn them over and look at the bottom. Why?
They want to see.
Oh, I don't know. Right.
Why do we do that?
So tie it together, you know, so that there's some kind of relationship. But also, you know, potters have to sell their work. And the longer the person holds that piece, the more apt they are to purchase it. So do a little decoration down there. You know? It's a good place to do brushwork. If it doesn't come out, it's no big deal. They're just gonna look at it and figure you did some decoration.
So you can't really stamp the bottom of this because you're gonna carve a bunch of it out, right? Like if
Well,
you
now,
do
yeah,
it-
you can stamp it afterwards.
Oh, you can? It's gonna be soft, it would be soft enough
Yeah,
for it to.
and normally in Japan we have rubber stamps which are soft, you know, like we buy here.
Yeah.
But they also make stamps out of hard plastic that you can press into clay. And they're wedge shape, all the surfaces are wedge shaped so that they're made to go into clay.
Into clay that is this hard.
Absolutely.
I know, I
Now,
want
the
to see
reason-
that done.
There's a lot of tools in Japan we use that aren't available here. Now, if before I get any further, you always want to trim from here to the interior. Why would that be? Anybody?
So you don't go too far.
Because if you go this way, what can happen?
Right off the edge.
Right, you cut the foot off. Okay, now you notice that I'm well braced, fingertips against the pot, my thumb was over here again. Remember the triangle, we always have a triangle going here. Okay, and you go very slowly. Now, fortunately, Elizabeth cut the rim so it's really nice and level, and so I'm not dealing with high and low spots. So, if the rim is crooked, then this is going to be crooked. Okay, so that's why I want you to get down when you get ready to take off. Before you take it off, get down here and look how level it is. It can be a little bit off, but you're going to be okay with it. Okay, so you normally want to take out about half of what the thickness is of this area. Okay, it's nice if you can glaze the bottom. It's not so critical with small pieces like this, but when you get into plates and platters and wide flat objects,
How do you know that you're not going too deep?
because I can hear, believe it or not, the sound of my tool on the clay. And the higher the pitch, the thinner it gets. And also, I checked it first. You know, I picked the piece up, looked at it, looked at the width, see where the foot's gonna fall, and I felt it, and I closed my eyes. You know, and I knew, okay? And so, if you go to the same depth, you know, like somebody was saying, how do you know how far to go? If you wedge your clay, most potters wedge your clay to about 3 hardnesses or firmnesses, depending on what you're making. You get used to the pressure building up against your finger as you get closer to the wheel head. And so you know when to stop. Yeah. So it's just practice. You know, after you throw a few thousand cups and mugs, it just happens. And so it's kind of like, you know, just get a sixth sense. And the thing is, it's good to go through pots, you know, and make holes, you know, you cut through the bottom, because that's where you learn. Okay, that's where you focus more on what's happening. Now also, because we're working with 130 kids a day in here, we don't want your pots sticking to the shells. The shells are crap. There's all kinds of things on them, and those shells in your own kiln would be beautiful and clean, and you wouldn't have to worry about it. So minimal contact to the kiln shell. So you want to get this super round, just like this is round. This is minimal contact to that surface. And so you want that there on this pot, so that if it does pick up something, we can take a scrubby or something and take care of it. Now, you're asking about how do you know? Anybody have a pointed stick, cut-off stick? So the other thing you can do, and you're gonna write this down. I don't know how you remember everything I'm talking about, because I had to rehearse this last night.
This one, right.
Okay? So, what you're going to do is when you think you're getting close, you take this cut-off stick here and you push down just enough to leave some lines, okay? If this does not sink down, that means, you know, I could probably take a little more clay out. But if I'm really concerned, I'll do it again, just a little harder. Okay, it still feels pretty solid.
Smoothing it off.
Okay, I'm gonna do a third one, even firmer. Okay, I'm pushing pretty hard now and nothing's happening. So that means, okay, I can either quit there because I've got it deep enough so if I put the glaze in, but how do I know if I've gone deep enough? Okay, you're gonna take something that's flat and level, you're gonna lay it here, and you want at least 1/8 of an inch or more
Well, that's good for
away
water.
from that stick. We're pretty close there, so we need to take some more off, okay? Okay, we'll get into compression and tension problems with larger pieces, you know, like plates and platters. It's really critical that you glaze both sides when you do that, so that you don't have those problems, cracking. Okay, so I'm gonna go back in here, and normally if you can go this far here, you should be able to go almost that far there. So, since it's Elizabeth, I'm not too worried. I'm being very conscious
Many of
here.
my own pots, so there you go. You said a half-inch clearance?
Pardon?
A half-inch
Eighth to a
clearance?
quarter.
Eighth to a quarter?
You you don't want this, you don't want anything in the pot. This one's an exception because the rim is pretty wide. Elizabeth's gonna do some carving on it. But normally, you don't want anything thicker in the pot than the rim, or the area just under the rim. Just a good habit to get into at this point, so that you don't have to relearn things later. How many of you guys are coming to the Big Pot Workshop? Anybody?
I signed up.
Jerry, I know Jerry's coming.
I'm working.
I'm working.
I'm working too.
What if I write you a note?
I can't, I'm really.
Okay, so that's about what we want to see. Can you guys all see that
So
over
what
there?
is it that we're looking for?
You want an eighth of an inch at least.
Between the bottom of that and.
Also, remember, what happens is, on a lot of things, because when you threw it and opened it up, you were pushing the clay down, the pot wants to keep going in that direction, which means this wants to come up during the firing process. So by running the stick over 2 or 3 times, you're compressing the clay, and usually it won't come up
It
on
looks like
small
it's a
pieces
half
like
inch
this.
to me.
It's like this. At least a quarter. Yeah, that's like a quarter.
Yeah. So the big thing is here, you're gonna glaze to there, right? The glaze, you're gonna glaze to this point. Now, what's nice about putting this curve in is that your Japanese watercolor brush, when you dip it in the wax, will lay right in there and give you a nice clean line, so that when you glaze, it looks nice. It's not ragged looking. Okay? A lot, I know I'm covering a lot here, but you guys have taken good notes, and that's great. Okay, so now at this point, we have a couple options. We're finished with the trimming process, but the next step you're gonna do tonight, when you get to this point, we're gonna put on-go, or slips, colored slips on the outside, and you're gonna take these home and carve some very bold designs in it.
Cool.
Is that like for scributa or something different?
I'm down.
What's the technique?
The technique, we're gonna talk about that a little bit later. But we're gonna put a colored clay on here, and then you're gonna carve through those very boldly, no fine lines or anything. I'll give you some examples in a little while. And then we'll go from there. So if you guys wanna take your pots, get them centered now, let Jerry and I come around and check and make sure you're in the ballpark, and then we'll start trimming, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, and then when you get them all done, don't take them off. I'll have the material out here and we'll give them a coat. And then you're gonna take them home, carve through them, and I'll have a couple examples here before you leave. Okay? Any questions?
What if you